Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, let's watch. If you're a cast member on this show or any of the shows that I watch, and you are thinking that I am providing you some sort of service as a therapist, I am not. I'm only reacting to what's on the show, what's edited. This doesn't replace in-person therapy. Obviously, keep that in mind. Let's watch.
Friend, so I'm in the interest of her best interest.
So they get a divorce because you support her.
Why? I'm not getting divorced. What you talking about?
Yeah. You guys are jumping to conclusions.
So
I love Yar and Jovi together.
You're being a wuss. You can't even manage your family. You're not man enough to manage your family.
Okay.
You said together.
The amount of misogyny and toxic masculinity in this tell-all is greater than normal. There's often that element, but I haven't been commenting on all of it because it's, I don't know, I hope it's obvious, but we're just seeing another example of that where this idea of, in fact, sometimes it's subtle and I don't always react to it. Like there was this moment where Angela, it was at the end of the night of the first night, and Angela was talking to Ed and saying like, she's a woman. You can't talk to a woman like that. And you got to be a man. And then Jovi and Andre were saying like, I would never talk to a woman like that. And okay, how about you never talk to a human being like that? Like it's such a weird attribution of gender in that situation. It's like you purposely run someone over when you're driving in the city or something. And because it's a woman, somehow it makes it worse. Like, well, as a man, I would never run over a woman like that, implying like, so you would run over a man like that? There's so many weird implications there. Also, it implies that women are weaker, is the message, right? Which is a strong belief within sexist notions of gender in our society and a lot of societies, that you can't talk to women like that because women are weak. You know, women, they're like children. They're lesser. You're talking down to them or something. There's just a lot of that. Now, as far as transgressions go, though that isn't high, but I hope that you see it, because if we're going to stop traumatizing ourselves and our children and the next generations regarding gender the way we have in the past, then we have to be aware of it. We have to see the matrix. We have to see the gendered ideas within our culture. That's step number one. Step number two is to stop engaging in those behaviors and those mindsets, and also call people out and just say, hey, or rewording. Like if I were there when they were saying that, you know, hey, Ed, you can't talk to a woman like that, I might subtly say, yeah, you can't talk to people that way. You can't talk to anyone that way. You know, I might not confront someone, but I might send a subtle message of why are you identifying women as the particular people you're not supposed to do that with? You know, an example of this is a woman will be murdered or harmed and abused in some way, and a male politician will say, look, I think that is atrocious behavior, that man abused that woman. I have a wife, I have a mother, I have a sister, and I would be upset if anyone treated them like that. What? Like, what if you didn't have a wife? What if you didn't have a sister? So suddenly now you can't relate or you don't care? It should just be human to human. Plus, the whole gender construct is ridiculous. I mean, there's so many aspects of the gender construct in our society and others that are completely unscientific and oppressive to everyone. Now, if you want to adhere to a gender tradition, if you will, I do, for example. I adhere to many of my culture's idea of what a man is, and I pride myself or something, but it feels comfortable to me at the very least. So there's nothing wrong with that, but we need to have flexibility around it, right? So if I want to diverge from the mandate regarding gender, then I should be able to without people commenting or feeling like I'm less of a man or less worthy as a human being or something. It's about flexibility and oppression, and this is pervasive. So Ed is exhibiting that right now, and I just felt like I'd spout for a second.
Yar and Jovi together.
You're being a wuss. You can't even manage your family. You're not man enough to manage your family.
Okay.
You said together.
You want to move to Europe.
Stop it.
You want to move to Europe. Give me a
You
break.
even don't know what you're talking about.
And specifically what he's saying is you, Jovi, need to put your foot down. You need to control your wife. You're not man enough to put her in her place, which is yikes.
Wuss.
Shaming me. Shut up.
Your husband is a
because you
wuss.
start to shame me, try to show the shame
Your
on me.
husband
I am
is a
not like
wussy.
you.
Ed, shut the up. Nobody wants to hear you
You're
anymore.
a pussy.
You're a pussy.
No, I'm serious.
Look
You
at
are
you.
a pussy. I mean that.
This is dumb.
You're letting her ruin your life,
What is
dude.
wrong with y'all? Y'all all need to grow up. Oh my gosh. Ed, how old are you?
How old are you? Well, yeah, that's one way of putting it, but at any age, this is atrocious. And yeah, it just seems fabricated. Now, does Ed have these thoughts in his mind? Maybe, but we haven't really seen this aspect of his behavior where he just calls everyone a pussy, right? It's new. If that were a thing in his personality, I would assume we would have seen that. I mean, we did see it kind of in previous tell-alls, but I don't know. There's a possibility that, in line with what I was talking about earlier, that he came to the tell-all similar to Angela at times, wanting it to go well, but also having a chip on his shoulder. And then when the show confronted him about Rose, and he seemed to be legit surprised that they were even going to have Rose and have those screenshots. And then Liz is going, what's going on? And then Ed spirals downward and feels completely humiliated. This is not going how he thought it was going to go. He overreacts extremely to Liz, and he's trying to make it better. It's not going well. And he doesn't, and he said in a previous conversation with Angela when they were confronting, he's like, I don't know how to be in a relationship. And there's a possibility that he's feeling like, look, I have nothing to lose. I've already, I think, made a fool out of myself. I don't know. You know, that's another aspect of this, that it could be a calculated choice where he's thinking, well, if I come across like I'm just a combative person and I am doing it on purpose, maybe I can salvage my ego, my persona of superiority. At the very least, I can appear superior. You know, because sometimes I get the impression that a lot of these cast members who attack the other cast members, they've read a lot of comments online. And, you know, if you've ever participated in these, not my comment section, hopefully, but others, at least I know my comment section doesn't have this, not even close to the amount of the extent in other areas on the internet. It's like 99.9%, if not higher percentage, negative to the max against every single cast member. There will be this phrase that I'll see people say as they're not defending someone, but they'll like someone on the show, kind of, or at the very least, they don't hate them as much as they hate others. And there's this phrase that people often say of just like, look, I hate this person, so I just want to make that clear, and then they say, but sometimes I can kind of relate to this person. Or, look, I'm not saying this person is a good person. I know they're a horrible person, but even though in my mind I'm like, you don't have to think every single person on these shows is a horrible, toxic human being. You don't. I don't think of that really. I don't think that about any of these individuals. I mean, in terms of that languaging, right? They all have issues, and some of them have greater issues, and some of them have issues that result in abuse of other people. But anyway, it's possible that Ed feels justified. He feels like there's a good, sizable percentage of audience that will get behind Ed in this moment, and he wants to garner that positive attention from people or approval or something. I don't know. But yeah. Pretty awful language from him in this moment. And yeah, I just wonder what the motivation is. It's an interesting question. What is the motivation? Is it clout? Is it drama? Is it trying to come back on the show? Because I could see Ed at this point, and who knows, it's just complete speculation, but I could see him thinking, there's really no reason for me to be on these shows anymore because I'm not dating someone from another country. So I don't have the central premise of this show. I don't necessarily want to be on Single Life again because I don't want to date other people because I think I do want to be with Liz. And if we're still together, then we're not going to be asked back. And so how do I stay on this show? Well, one way is to create a lot of drama. The other possibility is that the producers are behind it. Of course, I don't know, but yeah, it's pretty awful behavior.
Take him back again. Like I keep telling you, deserve so much better.
And you're not the only one.
I mean, that should be enough for you. You should be done.
I want to be a role model for my daughter. I want to be a role model. So that's where I need to keep my focus on.
Yeah, I don't know if this is what's happening, but for people that are treated poorly, mistreated, abused, abandoned, neglected as children, their idea of what is acceptable or fair to them will sometimes be skewed in that they will be treated poorly as adults, and it doesn't really register with them that this is unfair. We all get treated unfairly by our partners. We all are hurt by our partners. And if you have been raised well enough, then you notice when things are getting beyond a certain threshold upon which you should seriously think about leaving the person or, seriously know that that is not okay. But if you were treated poorly, you developed your range of what is acceptable by how you were seeing things when you were young. So for individuals like that, it just, people will say you deserve better, and they're like, intellectually they'll think, yeah, but deep down, they don't really believe it. There's a huge difference between our conscious ideas, the thoughts that we say, yeah, that's rational, and what we, quote unquote, actually believe. For example, I've suffered from health anxiety in the past. I don't so much anymore, but there's a time when having a needle or a shot or something, a blood draw, was one of the most terrifying things that I could ever imagine. Now, that's my body speaking. My mind was like, there is zero risk, or the risk is so small. It's definitely worth the risk to have the vaccine or have the blood draw or whatever. I know enough about medical science to know that it's not a problem, and I don't have anything to worry about. But my body, on the other hand, was extremely worried about it. And there was no amount of convincing that I could engage in with my body to change what my body felt about it. I could mitigate some of the anxiety by reminding myself that everything, similar things if people get on airline flights or other kinds of things that are generally considered to be irrational to be overly concerned about. This is the nature of anxiety. It's not usually rational or helpful. So there's a lot of anxiety that is helpful and rational, but diagnosable pathological anxiety is, not rational. Usually it's excessive. So in order to actually reduce my health anxiety, I had to, I've treated people and their phobias before and still do, and I know how to do the treatment, and it doesn't really require an external therapist. I can do it on myself. It's exposure therapy. If you're trained in it, then you obviously can conduct it on yourself, and I did, and thus was able to get rid of my phobia. I've had a lot of phobias throughout my life, and I've managed to get rid of all of them, which is a wonderful thing for me. And also, I want to say that if you have a phobia of flying, claustrophobia, germs, spiders, snakes, other kinds of things, social phobias, those things can be addressed in therapy. There's not a lot of things in my field that we can say that if you go to therapy, there's a pretty good likelihood that things will get better within a certain amount of time. Phobias is one of those things. PTSD is another thing. If you get proper exposure-based therapy, EMDR, prolonged exposure, other kinds of therapies for PTSD, and there's a similar protocol for phobias, you can be fairly certain that if you follow the protocol and it's tailored to you, because it has to be tailored to every individual, you can be fairly certain that things will improve over time. If you actually follow the protocol and the therapist knows how to do it and things go well, it's not guaranteed, of course, but it's a pretty high likelihood. So my whole point is that my body was saying something different than my prefrontal cortex, right? My conscious mind. So you can, in your prefrontal cortex, believe that you deserve better than Ed, but your body is what drives the car, and your body's like, well, I really don't think I do deserve better. I don't think I'll ever find anything better than that. So one of the ways to try to contrast that, and I will ask these questions to clients, and Liz is asking this question of herself right now, and maybe she learned it in therapy, or I don't know, is to ask yourself, would you say the same thing about your own child or a friend of yours or something, someone that you care about, or even just another human being? Liz to herself might say, yeah, I know Ed treats me like crap, but I don't deserve better, or I'm not going to find anything better than that. But then she asks herself, would this be a good role model for my daughter? Meaning that for my child, if my child engaged and learned that this is okay and engaged in a similar relationship, how would I feel about it? Well, I would absolutely feel, no, that's not okay for my daughter. She deserves better than that. I intellectually understand I deserve better, but my body says I don't deserve better. But my mind and body agree that my daughter deserves better. So maybe I do deserve better. It's something to focus on, right? So she has to externalize that notion to her daughter. She has to see herself through her daughter's eyes, or at least see her life through her daughter's life, to engage in a rational self-preservation way of thinking that she deserves better. You hear that, right? This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about self-awareness. I'm often talking about a connection with the self, a connection with who you are, what you want, what you need, this kind of thing. And how for some people, since they weren't attuned to enough as a child, they don't have a strong connection with the self, and therefore they have to go through a lot of therapy to get in connection with the self. But really, I don't know anyone who doesn't cut themselves off from their needs. None of us were 100% attuned to 100% of the time. And of course, that's where therapy can help everybody. And as a therapist, I've witnessed clients discover mind-blowing aspects of themselves that really helped them in their lives. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery wherever you are. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and flexible to your schedule. So discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
Back again. Like I keep telling you, you deserve so much better.
And you're not the only one.
I mean, that should be enough for you. You should be done.
I want to be a role model for my daughter. I want to be a role model. So that's where I need to keep my focus on. So,
Yeah, focus on your daughter.
yeah.
And that's it, Ed.
It can be a helpful way of determining if your traumas have given you schemas or made things normal that shouldn't be normal, is to ask yourself, if someone else were in the same situation, what would you say to them? It is a good exercise to engage in that will illuminate sometimes these ranges of what is fair being skewed as it applies only to you. Somehow everyone else deserves better, but you don't. It just doesn't make any sense. It is your body's sense of things because your body experienced that 0 to 5, and that's when your body, and when I say body, it's not like literally your toe believes this, but I'm referring to the rest of your body and mind, which is the rest of your nervous system, and our body is included in that, of course. But mainly, I guess what I'm talking about is our long-term memory, our senses of things, all probably within the brain and the rest of the nervous system. So I'm not saying that it's within your toe, for example. But, our gut is involved in our psychologies and really our whole body. Anyway, point is that that's what I'm referring to, is that the prefrontal cortex is where a lot of our conscious thought takes place. Of course, it doesn't only take place there, it takes place throughout the brain. But when we have injuries to that part of the brain, we experience deficits in this ability to coordinate different aspects of ourselves and also to question things, right? So, for example, other animals, one of the things that really distinguishes us is our very robust prefrontal cortex and other aspects of the cortex. And so for, cats, for example, you will notice that suddenly they'll just be afraid of something and they'll run out of the room. And they never learn because, if it was a human, you might have that experience like, ooh, something's making me afraid, and they run out of the room. And then they learn, well, there actually wasn't something to be afraid of. And so the prefrontal cortex and other parts of the brain, memory, this kind of stuff, emotion, starts to have a meta experience about the self. Has say, well, I know I felt scared, but was that rational? And why was I feeling that way? And should I feel that way? Cats don't have that ability in general. It's possible. It's hard to know because we can't communicate with cats effectively, but it's in all likelihood, given what we observe in cats and other animals, they don't have that ability because they don't have that structure of the brain. They didn't evolve that way. So we need to be able to engage in that, but sometimes we overemphasize our prefrontal cortex as ourselves. We think like, well, yeah, I of course I deserve better, and yeah, end of story. It doesn't acknowledge our schemas, our experiences, what's ingrained in our personalities. So, and I found that to be frustrating when I first started working with clients, because I was under the impression, I think from society or something, that once awareness was present in a client, then we were done. The quintessential example I have of this that I always hold on to was I was an intern just starting out as a therapist, and I was working with a family, and the mom was enmeshed with her oldest son. And there was a lot of over-involvement, oversharing with the oldest son. The son was, I think, maybe 12 or 11 or something. And the 11-year-old boy was parentified. He was kind of a companion for the mom. The mom, there was a divorce, and the mom was working a lot, had 3 boys to raise, and didn't have a lot of support in her life. And so as a product of that, which often will happen, is that the oldest child will become a companion or a friend or something, elevated age responsibilities for that child. And the child was experiencing symptoms, and the rest of the whole family was, the mom included. And so we talked about that. And this is an oversimplification. There's a lot of other aspects to this. But the mom, it took me a long time to convince the mom that of what I was observing, which was enmeshment and over-involvement, oversharing, this kind of thing. Because in the beginning, a lot of parents in this situation will say, well, he's just really mature, or he often asks me questions about my life. So what am I supposed to do? Just not say? And, the answer to that is that the child has been taught that that's their role. They feel responsible. And when you are, as a parent, in a better mood, the child is in a better place, because there's so much enmeshment that the child is very concerned about your mood, because their life is determined by your mood, because there's so much of a lack of differentiation there. And so the child is anxiously asking. We saw that with Tiffany and Daniel a little bit. I don't know if that's what was happening, but it kind of looked like that to me. It's hard to say. But so anyway, I convinced the mom over months, it took a long time, that the enmeshment and over-involvement was there and needed to change. It didn't mean that she was a bad mom. It's a normal thing. And so it's early enough, we're catching it early enough that we can intervene now. And the mom said, oh, I see it now. Thank you. That really helped. And we had a few sessions like that. And I thought, okay, we're done. The mom knows. And then it didn't change. The enmeshment didn't change. The mom would come in and say, I tried changing it and it didn't really work, or she would have an excuse, or she would say she had changed it and the son would say, no, it hasn't really changed, or I would observe that it hadn't changed, or the symptoms never really went away, or she started focusing on another kid. There's just all these resistances, shall we say. And that's because for the mom, her body, the rest of her mind, her prefrontal cortex had agreed and understood and seen, had insight into what was happening, but the anxiety was still there, the template was still there, the sense of what was fair was still there. I can't remember, but she likely experienced enmeshment when she was growing up, so it just looked normal to her. So all those things are in the way of insight producing change in behavior and personality. There's always excuses in the moment. It's like, for example, she might be stressed out and she just needs to talk to someone. And she's like, okay, I can't be enmeshed with my son. I have to, and we've talked about it with my therapist, and so I'm supposed to talk about it with someone my own age. So then she's like, and she hasn't cultivated relationships with other people her own age because of the stress and also her over-reliance on her son. So she has a pretty tentative, shaky foundation of a relationship with a friend. So she calls up her friend. This is just for instance. I don't remember if this is actually what happened, but So she'd call her friend and she'd say, hey, I need to talk with you about something, a stress that I'm going through. And the friend is, attentive, but not super attentive. And then my client, the mom, will feel rejected, maybe even have more reason to want to vent to someone, and then can't resist. And it's just like, look, that friend wasn't very helpful because she hasn't cultivated that over years. And then she's like, but I can't depend on my son. I'm not going to do that. And then she gives a signal to the son that she wants to say something, but she's resisting. The son picks up on that because he's been indoctrinated into this enmeshment. And so he will start to ask questions. And then she's like resisting. She's like, no, I'm not going to say anything. But then she reveals, because she can't help it. She's like, well, my life isn't going that well, but we've talked with our family therapist, and I don't want to be enmeshed with you. I want to give you space to be a kid, and so I'm not going to tell you. And then the kid starts crying and saying, like, I can't believe you're doing this to me. You're rejecting me, because the kid feels that it doesn't feel good when enmeshment changes. It often is resisted by everybody because it's scary to have that. Of course, it's better on the other side. You can have closeness and love and attachment without it being inflexibly enmeshed, And so the kid might start crying, and then the mom feels bad, and then the mom's like, the therapist is telling me to harm my kid now. This is bad. No, okay, I'll tell you everything. Mommy's going through some time, and she attenuates it to some extent. She doesn't say the full story to her son, but she says enough. And in her mind, she's like, well, I didn't dump everything on him, and he was demanding it. What am I supposed to do? He was like suffering, and so. There's a lot of things and then she would come into therapy and say, well, yeah, it kind of worked. And then she tells, mostly worked. And then she tells me a story, and I'm like, nothing about that sounds like it worked, But then she might say to me, but, friends don't respond. What am I supposed to do? No one reaches out, and can't I be close to my kids? I don't want to be like my parents that shut me out all the time. And so she's overcompensating by sharing too much. There's all these ideas that will influence their adherence to the pattern, to agree with how their body wants things to be. Anyway, so for Liz, there's a possibility that, I think a very distinct possibility, because we know at least enough about her childhood that indicates the strong possibility that she developed schemas that she does not deserve love, and that she does deserve to be abused. And so for her to externalize that to her daughter is potentially an interim thing to do because she can't change the way her body feels overnight. It takes a long time. And the way that therapy helps with this is, if a client comes to me with this, is that through a long-term relationship, I show the individual that they absolutely deserve to be treated well, and that they don't deserve to be treated poorly. We facilitate that within our relationship, or if it's a couple, I would facilitate that within the couple and between them and me. And so over time, they have a new experience, a corrective experience that actually does change the body, so that they don't have to constantly work against their sense of things or their impulses, right? Their felt understanding of how things should be in their schemas. And so with those corrective experiences, which take a long time, the individual actually doesn't need as much insight anymore, because they don't need to be pushing back against something all the time. That's how therapy works to change personality. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.